So box.
Hi, my name is Rochelle, and you're watching or listening to Box F1 Pod. Welcome to the Mexican Grand Prix episode. And almost for the first time this year, I'm going to say, what a race, and mean it, because literally, what a race. We didn't know what was going to happen from beginning to end. If we take first place aside, that was obvious from the get-go. But the rest of it, oh my God. Every moment. There were moments when I had no idea what was going on. I had to rewatch it like 4 times. I can't even imagine what the stews were going through. There were moments when there was like 45 incidents in one go, and then you had to sort through it all, and it was a lot. We had virtual safety cars when we didn't need them, and we didn't have virtual safety cars when we did need them. We had team orders, but we also didn't have team orders when we needed them. We had sassy radio messages, so many sassy radio messages, and just so much drama and racing from beginning to end. And I'm so excited to discuss all of it. While we're chatting, I will be making pozole verde, which is a like chicken soup type thing from Mexico. There's also pozole rojo, which is a lot more famous. It's with pork. I don't eat pork, so I'm making pozole verde, which is also different because the rojo version is made with dried red chilies and pork, and this one is made with fresh green chilies and chicken. And I checked, and it's still authentic, so we're good to go. I will start chopping, and as I chop, we will kick things off with the digital warm-up. Lap 1. F1 news. A couple of small things. Aston Martin was in minor breach of the cost cap. They weren't breached in the sense that they overspent, but they were breached in the sense that they submitted it late, from what I understand, and so that's its own form of cost cap violation. I don't really know how you miss a deadline like that, but whatever. It apparently was for extenuating circumstances. And then the other minor thing is that Toto Wolff was not present at the Mexican Grand Prix. And I don't actually think they shared why, but he was not there, which maybe contributed to some of the sass we heard from one George Russell. Moving on, lap 2, off-track F1. So first up, we've got the next installment of the Passenger Princess series with Amelia de Millienberg from Chicken Shop Date. This time she was with Ollie Bearman, who was teaching her how to parallel park, although, I'm gonna be honest, she never actually parallel parked. She made one attempt, and then he was like, let me show you. And then he did it, and then she never tried to do it again. So that failed. Also, they're putting her in like really nice cars, and I realize this is F1, but like learning how to drive in a Alfa Romeo feels stressful. Ollie's like, he doesn't necessarily have her dry sense of humor in the same way, but he's so sassy that it just works anyway. Like at one point she was like, should we turn the mirror on? And he was like, what do you mean? And she was like, I guess it looks dark, at least in an Alfa Romeo does. And so I guess the car wasn't on, and then she forgot to turn the car on, and then he was like just giggling, and he's like, are you really this bad? Or are you pretending? Always not meant for TV, but also completely meant for TV, if you know what I mean. And then at one point he was like, I only got my license like 2 years ago. And she was like, really? And he's like, yeah, I'm 20. And she's like, oh yeah, I'm 21. And the side eye he gives her, so funny. And then later on, he talks about the fact that he like overate during the break or whatever. This was at the Belgian Grand Prix, and that he was super overweight, and that it probably wouldn't help his situation during the race. And it's just extra funny because Ollie Bearman being overweight, like I know that he's overweight in the sense of F1, but just Ollie Bearman saying I am overweight when he is a twig is funny. Also, Lewis and Charles played a giant game of Guess Who, which was really fun. Charles lost. Charles kept guessing George, which in his defense, English accent, tall, skinny, has hair. it was an easy mistake. Lewis won. He had Carlos. His final question was, do I like peppers? And Charles was like, yes. Which also, he caught on much faster than I would have, because my first thought is like, who likes peppers? Because when I think of Carlos, I think he likes chilies, which I know is the same thing, but like saying the word peppers just really threw me off. So Franco Colapinto, I don't know if you guys remember, but last week in America, he ignored team orders and overtook Pierre to fight for 17th position. And when he was asked about it in the media, he said, history isn't written by cowards. Sir, you're fighting for 17th. Let's relax a little about the history not being written for cowards. But a hilarious response, honestly. And like perfectly melodramatic, in line with Franco's personality. He's just like a melodramatic human. Lewis was asked about the Max and McLaren situation, and he said that Max is super cutthroat and that the McLarens really need to step it up or else he'll take it away from them. Max is cutthroat. Is he being cutthroat in this situation? Not really. He's just like existing, and the McLarens are like internally combusting before this race. But even still, like, they're not thriving necessarily. There's still so many internal issues. And he just exists there and is doing well. Speaking of which, not speaking of Max doing well, speaking of McLaren sucking, we have now learned that the repercussions that caused such a hullabaloo last week, we have now found out are no longer in effect, presuming because Oscar caused a collision last week with his teammate, and so therefore it all canceled out. Just stop talking. Literally, McLaren needs to stop talking. The only person on that team that's good at not talking is Oscar, and even he, the words that he's being apparently told to say, because I think if Oscar had his way, he just wouldn't talk, are insane. And everyone would be much happier if McLaren just stopped talking. On the radio, off the radio, in the media, out of the media, just like stop. You're making things so much worse for yourself. All right, moving on. Lap 3, trackside and CDMX. So we've got a few celebs walking the streets of Mexico City. We had Becca Bloom. If you are not on TikTok, she is a famous billionaire, but famous for being kind and fun and sweet. I don't know how to explain her. She is incredibly rich and lives an incredibly insane lifestyle, but it's still approachable and relatable, and she's lovely. And she was there, and she was wearing the same outfit that Alex wore at Austin. She had this like really big shoulder with bows on it, like a very Southern style fit with boots. Becca wore it this week, which is cute. Other celebrities included a man called Renee Flynn, who the internet lost their crap over. He is a pretty man. I don't know where I know him from, but he's pretty. And that's pretty much it. I didn't really know anyone else. There was a boxer there. There was this British comedian that was there. I don't know. I was kind of expecting more in Mexico City. I think Mexico City is like, I know the track isn't like the most crazy, but like it's like a really fun race, I think. Checo was there. So he's making his big comeback next year. I'm very excited. Max was asked if he had any words for the fans who missed Verstappen, and he said, well, he's back next year. Max also said in an interview that he is now listened to more within the team. And then he followed up with, it's not like over the last few months, he says he feels like he's being listened to more. But then he like followed up and he's like, it's not just Laurent coming, it's across the entire team, including the stakeholders in Thailand and Austria. I don't know if he added that last part in because it sounded like a very clear dig at Christian Horner, and he's not trying to do that. I find it odd that Christian wasn't listening to him. I believe him, but like, I don't know. I guess some things about the Christian thing still confuse me, just because if he was being a bad leader, when did he start being a bad leader? If it was for the sexual harassment claims, this happened 18 months later. So, like, was he fired for that just with time lapsed? Was he fired for the poor performance in the team? Because he only had like 4 months of poor performance. Not even 4 months. It was like less than half of the season of poor performance with the team. And he was fired for that immediately. They immediately blamed Christian Horner. But the team is doing better now. And is it because of Christian Horner being gone? It just all seems very odd. So what was he doing that was that bad? During FP1, like so the teams are required to run someone else in the car at least once a year. And for some reason, 9 of the 10 teams chose Mexico City. Oh my God, what is happening? So Mercedes had George put on a disguise and go to watch FP1 from the grandstands wearing a Lucha Libre mask. And he fully blended in. He posted, he's like, it's been a long time since I've been able to watch any Formula One from the stands with the fans. It was really wholesome. And just like, imagine being a fan that George sat next to and then going on Instagram and seeing that George Russell was sitting right next to you and you just had no idea. Very cute. Another funny thing that happened was that Fernando was seen walking through the paddock, and fans zoomed in on the picture of him walking through the paddock and noticed that his phone, the picture on his phone case was George Russell, and they just ran with it. And George Russell was asked about it, and he was like, "We don't have a relationship like that. Like, I don't think it's me." And then there was another video scene of him talking to Fernando about it, Fernando showing him his phone case and George like cackling. And then Fernando was interviewed about it. He's like, "As always, Formula One, jumping to conclusions." I don't know why he's Russian. Jumping to conclusions, and I will not fill in the story because you don't deserve it. He basically just won't tell us what's the rest of he's like, "That's not the full story. There's more to the picture, but you don't deserve to know, so I will not tell you." And that made me laugh. Carlos's helmet was a beautiful, chilly sensation. And on the corner, there was still Sparkles the unicorn. Did not help this week, but I hope we don't lose faith in Sparkles because I don't think Sparkles was the problem this week. There was something else afoot, but I'm glad that he's continuing to include Sparkles wherever he can. Moving on, Max was asked, "What's the biggest thing that could stop you from winning this championship?" And look, there is nothing Max loves more than, there is nothing Max hates more than being asked a vague question that really has no answer to it. In this case, it was, what could stop you from winning this championship? It's such a dumb question. I think the last time this happened, he was asked, what are the chances of him moving, if there's a chance that he would move to Mercedes. This was pre-silly season. And his response was, "There's also a chance I could not wake up tomorrow." Hilarious. Today he was asked, or this weekend he was asked, if you could, what's the one thing stopping you from winning this championship? And he was like, "There's a lot of things stopping me. I could have a bad pit stop. I could get an unlucky safety car. I could just be unlucky. I could trip and fall in the shower and break my leg." He loves giving a unhinged existential answer to dumb questions. Like, what is Max supposed to say? What could stop him? A lot of things could stop him. He's right. What couldn't stop him? Also dumb question. Honestly, I don't belong in sports journalism because these questions are all ridiculous to me. What are they supposed to say? Anyway, the final thing I wanted to note was during the driver's parade, there was like a group of dancers on the side that like doing a full routine throughout. And as they were all getting into the cars, Isaac just literally walked up to this entire group of people dancing and just stood in front of them and started bobbing along with them, just like looking straight at their faces. It was slightly unnecessary, but so funny. He just like, they didn't like interact with him. He just stood in front of them, bobbed along for like 2 minutes, and then walked up to his car. It was quite funny. All right. With that, we conclude the digital warm-up. On to analysis. All right. On to analysis. So did a quick break in between. You notice hair up, new cup, had a mild pepper situation. I have since recovered, but did a little meal prep. So I peeled the skin off the peppers and put the tomatillos and the onion from the soup and from the oven into here. Now I'm going to add in the cilantro and then some broth, and we'll make the salsa part while we chat about analysis. So first things first, an important thing to remember is that Mexico's at a really high altitude, which not only changes how the drivers feel, but also the setup of the car, how the tires react, the strategy, all of that is impacted by the altitude. So it's important to remember that as we move forward, because that impacted a lot of things. Tire life, the way the car reacted on track, all of that was affected by altitude. So in quali, the biggest thing that happened was Lando had a sensational lap, to the point where when he was asked about it, he's like, I'm honestly not sure how that happened. Oscar, on the other hand, qualified 7th. He qualified 7th. And Carlos qualified. He qualified 7th. Originally, Carlos had qualified 7th, but because he had the 5-place grid penalty from last time, he will be starting much lower. Well, 5 places lower, so 12th. The other things that were exciting this time around is that both Ferraris ended up in P2 and P3. This is the highest Lewis has qualified since joining Ferrari, which was very exciting for him. In the press conference, he was asked how that's going to change what he does at the start, and he was like, well, I have nothing to lose, unlike Lando, so I'm going to be going full steam ahead. And boy, did he. So the starting grid for the Mexican Grand Prix is as follows: Lando, Charles, Lewis, George, Max, Kimi, Oscar, Ollie, Yuki, Esteban, Carlos, Nico, Fernando, Liam, Gabriel, Alex, Pierre, Lance, and Franco. All right, so moving on to the race. What a start. Lando had an incredible start. Kudos to him. He shot off as soon as the lights went out, and we did not see him for 2 hours. Behind him, however, well, at the start, basically, there was a moment where, the start to the Mexico Grand Prix is always a little chaotic, because there's like such a long way up until the first turn. We've never seen 4 cars side by side. This time we did. All 4 cars, Max had shot up in front of George, contrary to George's belief, but we'll get to that in a moment. He had shot up in front of George, and it was him, the 2 Ferraris, and Lando side by side. And then a whole bunch of chaos started. Max went off. I thought he was done for, but then he came back on and ended up in 4th. At this point, George gets on the radio, extremely angry, and is like, dude, he can't just go on the grass and gain a position. As George will eventually see, Max didn't gain a position. He had already passed George when all of that happened. The only person he had overtaken in that moment was Lewis, but he gave the spot back. At the same time, Lewis had overtaken Charles. Charles also went off, but he then came back on ahead of Lewis, even though in theory Lewis had overtaken Charles. So, in summary, Max had overtaken George before he went off track. Then he had also overtaken Lewis while he was off track, but gave the spot back. Meanwhile, Lewis had overtaken Charles. Charles ended up going off track, ended up in front of Lewis, but never gave the spot back. So I'm clarifying this because there was a lot of like, why didn't Max get a penalty? The person who deserved a penalty in this case was Charles, but he didn't get a penalty. And we kept going. Elsewhere on the track, there was also chaos happening. Liam DNF'd pretty early from the race, but while he was still in the race, he did almost kill a marshal, because for some reason the marshal was on track. And literally when you watch the onboard, and even not the onboard, it's like the marshal just barely escaped with his life. So that was insane. I don't know why the FIA allowed him on track at that time. Did they not realize that Liam was still, because like he gets told when to go on track to clear whatever, or to run across. It was just crazy. It's like one of the most unsafe things. I don't think I've seen such a close call in my time in F1. Which is saying a lot. Moving on to Max and Lewis. So in about lap 6, Max goes to overtake Lewis it's a pretty aggressive turn. I wouldn't say that, I mean, no one would say, even Lewis didn't say, I don't think that, not that I heard at least, that this was something that was not okay. It was just hard racing. So Max goes to overtake Lewis. There was a bit of contact. I think Max succeeds in overtaking Lewis, but then Lewis comes right back at him, brakes super hard trying to go around the outside of Max, I think. But instead of going around the outside of Max, he just went off track. And then according to the steward's instructions, they were supposed to go off into this like exit lane, but it was a really, really narrow exit lane. He didn't make it onto the exit lane. He went through the grass, he passed through the exit lane, and then ended up back on track ahead of Max. And then he got a 10-second penalty for it. First, everyone thought it was because he didn't follow so there was like 25 investigations happening from this, and it was like from turn 1 to turn 4, like 14 things happened, and they were investigating all of it. So I think some of the investigations and then the forthcoming penalties got mixed up in everyone's head, and probably the steward's heads also, because how do you even keep track? But basically, if Lewis ended up getting a 10-second penalty, it felt like it was because he failed to follow the steward's instructions and went off track and didn't go into the exit lane. But it was actually because he went off track and he left the track and gained a lasting advantage because he ended up ahead of Max by like 2 seconds. Everyone, of course, freaked out. Max never gets penalized. Why is Lewis getting penalized? But in this case, Lewis, in fact, did deserve the penalty. 10 seconds feels harsh, but that's actually the official penalty for leaving the track and gaining a lasting advantage. The only times that doesn't happen is on like turn 1. They will give like a 5-second penalty for that instead. But in this case, really the official penalty is 10 seconds, which is what Lewis got. He did, after all that happened, he did get they played a radio message where he said, so are we not going to do anything about gaining a lasting advantage in turn 1, about people gaining a lasting advantage in turn 1? And because they played it at that time, everyone assumed he was talking about Max. He wasn't talking about Max. He was talking about Charles back at the start in turn 1 when he gained a lasting advantage by overtaking Lewis off track. That he never got penalized for. But all of this was like really sad because Lewis had qualified so well and everyone had such high hopes that he was finally going to get his moment at Ferrari, and it just all went down the drain, and it was really sad. During this time, though, as all this chaos was happening with Lewis and Max, Ollie overtook them both, just squeezed on by, and is now in 4th position. How did he do that? How did Lil Ollie Bearman do that? It was so impressive because like it wasn't like he just had like a good qualifying lap. It wasn't that he like maximized on other people's failures or losses or whatever. He truly got there on merit. He maximized on chaos and did an incredible overtake on 2 world champions. Later in a post-race interview, he was like, I was shitting myself. I love Ollie. It was a really, really great moment. And then he, like, obviously with pit stops and everything, there was like, will he, won't he? But he managed to finish in 4th. Through the whole, after, that was only lap 6. So like, despite there being moments of doubt just due to like pit stops and strategies and stuff, he still, on pure merit, ended up in 4th, which is the highest I think Haas has ever scored, or in the last like 7 or 8 years. That's the highest they've gotten, and they've never gotten a podium, and it was so close. Let's quickly talk about George. So George was so spicy on the radio this entire race. First, there was the incident with Max where he's like, you can't just overtake on grass, blah, 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 blah. There was like a lot of grass action this entire race. My friend described it as the Wimbledon of F1, which fair, but like in my head, what I kept hearing was Anne Hathaway and Princess Diaries running on the grass to get to her grandmother, and then the megaphone across the lawn goes, "Get off the grass," and then it does in like 14 different languages. That's what I kept hearing as the drivers just like took a stroll through the grass. Tons of grass action. Don't really know why. We were just like really loving the grass this time. But George was upset. So he was upset when Max went off and then like came back on because he thought that that's how Max got ahead of him, but it wasn't. And then he spent like half the race trying to convince the team to to tell Kimi to let him overtake him. But they weren't listening to him, and he just kept getting angrier and angrier. But the thing that was happening was that George was faster than Kimi when his first request came in, but trying to go fast while keeping Oscar, who was behind him, at bay, really eats up at those tires. So poor George was just like destroying his tires, trying to convince his team that he is faster than his teammate. And by the time the team listened to him, he wasn't really faster than his teammate. He wasn't like slower, but he was like, it was a struggle, which is kind of annoying and kind of weird that after everything George has done to prove his loyalty, to prove his talent, to prove his consistency to this team, they don't seem to prioritize him. Like with the contract, like I don't know what George has got to do to be loved by Mercedes, but they are not like showing the love back. And I don't know why. I don't know what he's done to deserve it. But anyway, what was funny, he was like, as he was trying to convince his race engineer to let him through, he just kept getting angrier and angrier on the radio. At one point, he got really sassy and was like, "There's a McLaren behind me. Would you like me to let them through?" And his engineer goes, "No, thank you." And he goes, "Okay, just checking." And then when he's literally at his wit's end, he gets on the radio shouting more than I've never seen George lose his shit in this way, but he is shouting on the radio and he's like, "Marcus, I've got a damn McLaren up my ass. Let me pass Kimi. If I can't convert it into a podium, I'm happy to let him by again. But like, this is ridiculous." But much angrier than that. There was no like replacement swear words for George. He wasn't like making up weird words to say instead of saying fucking damn asshole. He was just swearing up a storm. And it was funny. In other funny radios, Alex Albon at one point gets some feedback on his tires and he just goes, "Just ask the other car. Don't understand what's going on." I don't know what it is about Alex on the radio, but he gets so mad. He gets so angry on the radio and it turns into like a petulant child, and which is like something I've never heard come out of Alex's mouth outside an F1 race. And it's so funny. Another good radio was Max at one point got on the radio to GP and was like, "What do you want me to do?" And literally for the first time ever, I heard GP say, "I don't know." And then, I mean, obviously we all know this. GP is not the one who makes all the decisions. There's obviously a whole team of people up there on the pit wall. But we never like hear them confer. But I guess GP forgot to turn off the radio or press the wrong button. So he was like, "So we're doing a 1-stop or a 2-stop?" And Max goes, "I can hear you." Which was funny and insightful because everyone was like, "We're doing a 2-stop?" Question mark. Then there were a lot of 2-stops, but I've never seen GP just not know the answer. He always has something where he's like, or at least he'll say, "We're checking." Never like, I don't know. But yeah. And then another weird radio that happened was to Lando. He was asked what to do with Oscar in case of a safety car. And I don't understand why they're asking Lando again. I guess because he's run both tires at that point, potentially, and that's why they were asking him. But it really felt like he was making a strategy call for Oscar. And I don't know why they would ask him to do that. Like, they're really, like, try to have these conversations with the drivers while they're driving. Like, they're like, so what do you think we should do? Thoughts? Let's connect. Let's sync. Do we want to circle back on this? Like, tell them what to do or not to do or like whatever. But like, why are we having a conversation about it on the radio? And why is it with the opposing person? Like, this happens so many times and I just don't understand the point. McLaren seems to be acting like they're still in a constructors championship and they're not. They should literally just be focusing on the drivers championship. But if they say they're now prioritizing, anyway, we'll get to that in a minute. But Oscar, for his race, he had a terrible qualifying. He had a really bad start. He went from like 7th to like 11th and fought his way back up to 9th and then had to fight his way all the way back up. Eventually, he started to rally. Like, he started overtaking towards the end. He started making good moves, and it was like the Oscar of old was starting to shine through. I don't know if he just suddenly got control of the car, but like, I don't know what happened. But like, it's really sad to see Oscar this way. It's really not what we grew to expect in the first half of the season, because like when Lando was in this position last year, Lando had never had such a consistent streak of wins and of dominance and of us watching him like learn and grow and evolve and like make a mistake, but then not do that mistake again. Like, we saw that consistently with Oscar this first like whole half of the season. Lando last year was way more inconsistent. He was like up and down. And then when he started to have a chance to beat Max in the championship in the second half of the season, he started like, you could see that he was like mentally crashing out, basically. Like, the pressure was really getting to him. With Oscar, again, I don't know what he's thinking because he always has the same face on his face. But like, it seems less to be about external pressure in the same way that it was for Lando. And it seems more like it's internal pressure, because we've seen Oscar thrive under external pressure and be just fine. But like, the only thing I can think of is that it's internal pressure of not feeling the teams behind you. And then his car clearly being worse than Lando's. Not necessarily like, I'm obviously not saying that it's been tampered with and like, you know, the theories that McLaren is choosing one or the other and like making it impossible for the other driver to win, whatever those conspiracy theories are. I don't believe that, but there's something wrong with this car. And I remember how long ago, but there was a point when they brought an upgrade that Lando took and Oscar said it didn't make his car any different. So he kept what he had before. Maybe that, if that's still in play, then maybe that's what's going on. I'm not sure. It's all strange. Like, there's just like no explanation for like what's going on with Oscar. It just seems really out of the blue, and he seems rather dejected by it. All right, finally, let's talk about the virtual safety car. So Carlos had a terrible weekend, literally from bad to worse. He had a decent qualifying, but then because of he had the 5-place grid penalty, and then during the race, he just kept getting penalty after penalty. And then like there was something wrong with the car where he like kept speeding in the pit lane because it wasn't like, I'm not really sure what the mechanical thing that was wrong with the car was, but there was a technical issue that was causing him to drive faster in the speed lane, in the pit lane, than he was supposed to. So he got penalties for that. And then with like 2 laps to go, I think, he DNF'd. His car stopped working. He drove the car off track. He was like literally in the area, runoff area, where he basically did the job for the marshals and whoever else was going to move his car. He brought it to where they would have brought his car. And then for some reason, the FIA was like, we need a virtual safety car right now. And the reason this was incredibly frustrating was because so first they did a yellow flags. And as the yellow flags are happening, there are 2 battles like really coming to a head. Max is gaining on Charles like nobody's business. And as the double yellow flags are waving, Max is not slowing down. And then there was, on Charles's radio, you could just hear him giggling about it because like Max was just like really coming in hot at him. And then behind them, Oscar was really catching Ollie Bearman for 4th. Like he was so close, so close to Ollie Bearman. And then they did the virtual safety car with like a lap left to go. And like we all know, racing to the finish line is like one of the most exciting things that we don't get to see that often anymore. And it's based on prior experience, the FIA loves a race to the finish line and loves to address things to make sure we have a race to the finish line. Hashtag 2021. So it was very odd that they decided to randomly do a virtual safety car at this moment. It was like the worst time virtual safety car ever, and also a completely pointless VSC. They've now said that there was warnings that Carlos's car was going to catch on fire, and that's why they did the VSC. And maybe I'm not understanding something, but the car is not on track, so it can catch fire just fine over there in the corner, and they can keep racing. It was really annoying. And then the virtual safety car ended with like half a lap left, and Max almost got Charles, but he did not. He would have gotten Charles without that virtual safety car, and I'm pretty sure Oscar would have gotten Ollie, but those would have been such fun battles to watch, and we got robbed of that. Charles and Ollie are breathing a sigh of relief for sure, but as much as I love that this was Ollie's best finish, I would have loved, if he can't get a podium, fifth is also his best position. So, yeah, I don't know. It was really, really annoying that we didn't get to see that. And maybe they wouldn't have succeeded, or one would, another wouldn't, but it still would have been so fun to watch, and we just got robbed of that. My favorite meme going around was that Carlos DNF'd on purpose so that Charles could keep second, because, what's their, Charlos? Carl's? Is their name just Carl? What's Sinclair? So I don't know what their name is. It sounds like I'm crashing out. But okay, so now moving on post race. On the podium, this was weird. So Max and Charles both turn in to spray Lando, but Lando sidesteps both of them to go spray his team rep. And they both just pause to look at Lando and then turn around and just spray each other. Which seems to be a pattern with Lando. He just won't spray other people on the podium. Not really sure why. It's fun to see the drivers interacting with each other in that way, but to each his own. He wanted to celebrate with his team member. So we got to see Verstappen spray each other at full force, up close. So that was fun. In the interviews, when Ollie was being interviewed, his family was standing and his girlfriend were standing outside the media pen barriers, and he caught them, and his girlfriend was started sobbing basically. And his dad noticed that she was crying, and he turned around and hugged her, and they're both just standing there tearing up. And then Ollie started tearing up watching them tear up. And it was so wholesome. It was such a happy moment. That made me happy there was no virtual safety car almost, because we got to see this moment, and I really hope he gets a podium soon, because that was really, really wholesome. Protect Ollie at all costs. He's so funny and so sweet, and he's just a baby. He's just a baby. He also had a moment on the radio where his engineer was like, "Your dad wants to say a few words," and then he went, "Oh my God, again." And his dad came and he's like, "Hey, all," and Ollie was like, "Dad, I have to get out of the car." And his dad's like, "Oh, okay, well done." I don't know why Ollie was so annoyed with him, but it was funny. This was one of the oddest things I've ever seen. In the post-race press conference, Lando got booed when he got out of the car and on the podium, which, by the way, on the podium, if you've ever seen the Mexico Grand Prix podium, they rise up on an elevator shaft with their car wearing a sombrero. Lando had put his sombrero on the car, not on his head. I don't know if this was because he had once dressed up in a sombrero on a yacht with friends and people accused him of cultural appropriation. So he's just not touching the sombrero. Maybe he just was wearing another hat, didn't want to wear the sombrero, but he wasn't wearing the sombrero. But when he came up, he was booed. And he was booed when he got out of the car. And in the post-race press conference, an interviewer says, "Hey, so about the booing, we did a poll, and it seems like in Mexico, I'm not sure about all the other boos you get, but in Mexico, they were booing you because of that race where where Oscar had to give you the place back, so you won, and they think that you should give the points back. So my question is, would you give the points back?" And if you zoom in on Charles's face as that question comes out, he makes the funniest face. What the fuck? Like he does a quick glance around at the other two. Even Max like quickly looks around. They're like both like, what kind of question is this? And then it was like, what race are you talking about? And the guy was like, the one where blah blah blah. And then like at least do your research, sir, if you're gonna call him out in this bizarre way. And Landon's like, oh, it sounds like they're talking about Monza. Well, we had a similar situation last year where I had to give this position back because I got pitted at the wrong time and Oscar deserved to win. And that's the same that happened here. So I'm not really sure what the issue is. But if they really want me to give those points back, I can. Literally such a dumb question. And also, why are you calling someone out for being booed? Like, why are you focusing in on that? That's like so annoying. It's like such a like. I'm entirely Team Lando on this. That's a dumb question to ask someone. That's a rude question to ask someone. And what do you want them to say? No, I want to keep the points. Obviously, he's keeping them anyway. So like, what's the point of this question? Anyway, the driver of the day was Ollie Bearman, and I fully agree. I think Ollie should have gotten it. Lando also did a superb drive. Like he definitely benefited the most out of this, out of today's race. But the driver of the day was Ollie. He held his own with world champions in his rookie season, did some killer moves, and held on to the position he earned for himself. So 10 out of 10, Ollie. Dick in the box. Altitude? There was no like real dick in the box. There were so many incidents that weren't inherently anyone's fault. Maybe George on the radio was such a menace. But that's kind of driver of the day energy. I kind of love when they do that. So I don't know if I want to give him a dick in the box for telling his engineer that there's a McLaren up his ass. Yeah, I think I'm just going to go with altitude. I don't think there was a true dick today. Even McLaren got away slightly scot-free. Okay, so the race results for the Mexican Grand Prix are Lando, Charles, Max, Ollie, Oscar, Kimi, George, Lewis, Esteban, Gabby, Yuki, Alex, Isaac, Lance, Pierre, Franco, Carlos, DNF'd, Fernando DNF'd, Nico DNF'd, and Liam Lawson DNF'd. A lot of goddamn DNFs. The current standings are as follows. Lando with 357 points, Oscar with 356 points, Max with 321 points, and I don't really care about anyone else. So Max is now, dear God, 36 points behind the championship leader, which is Lando. And Lando is 1 point ahead of Oscar. He gained 1 point during this race, which is a big kudos to Oscar for rallying towards the end as he did and gaining as many points as he possibly could. I mean, there is still, everyone is saying there's like a much slimmer chance. There is still a slim chance, but there's still 3 races to go and a sprint race as well. So not all hope is lost for either Max or Oscar. And there's still everything to lose for Lando, who is literally just 1 point. He's got 1 point more than everyone else, than Oscar. There's still a chance for anyone to win. We are literally going down to the wire, which, we don't get to do very often. And it's quite exciting. So we'll see what happens. We have a 2-week break before we head to Brazil. And Max really dominates at that track. And it's also such a fun race. So we will see what happens. Literally all is still to play for. I can't remember the last time we were this close between 3 people. A 3-way race is so exciting. I don't think it's happened since I started watching. So can't wait for that. And here is my soup. I don't know at what point you can see it. Pozole verde. It does look like swamp water, but I swear it's not. Ta-da! And that's it for the Mexican Grand Prix. Until next time, see you soon. Box.